Let me introduce myself yet again. Anna Szulc, that's my name and surname. You can be confused by this slide from my lab. You can see a giraffe and a jackal in the background. I'll explain that later. What's important now is that I teach math at the high school, Kazimierz Wielki High School in Zduńska Wola, a school that I've graduated from, and a school that celebrated its 100th anniversary last year. I'm one of these people who have never had any problem with choosing their profession. I've always wanted to be a teacher. So based on these experiences and how I've acted upon them, I'll tell you a story of myself. And if I had to choose my profession yet once again, I'd choose the same. Let's start with the word teacher. Teacher is the person who should teach you, right? But the teaching part, at some point I've started to refer to myself. Professional experience, personal development, working on your professional tools taught me to be humble towards this profession, towards the students. Students are human beings. They have problems which they cannot handle. It taught me that working with people requires being with people. Also, the world is constantly changing, and you need to take into account your experiences, the experiences of your colleagues, the effects of new research. It also teaches us that the ex cathedra teaching and the drill command creates a barrier between a student and teacher. A couple of years ago, a thing happened with more than 30 boys. We went to perform the Clean the World happening. It was the start of a school year. I didn't know these boys. I didn't know most of their names. When we reached the location, somebody was telling a story in a very non-elegant language. This boy tried to provoke me, very likely. And since I didn't know his name, I had to take some time in order to address the situation and not allow myself to be provoked. After a while, I asked him to stay with me in the back. I asked for his name and told him that I'm only addressing the question now because it was very incoherent, the language he was using and his looks. And I asked him for the reason for such habits, and asked him whether he could acknowledge my this proposal of mine not use such a language in the future. I saw how his face turned red just like his jacket, when he was catching up with his friends and telling them the situation that just happened. So in my work, my work is to build correct patterns of the world outside for the students. And I decided to do that from the very first class, when we don't know the students. I learned how important it is to handle correctly your emotions. So I realized that it's not necessary to take responsibility for your students' words and thoughts. Now I'm organizing this boot camp for my students, 25 September, so in less than 2 weeks. These are the pictures from 3 years ago. It's very cheap. We ride our bikes to a camping where my students prepare their own meals. They propose and implement their own activities, sports activities, games. It takes we stayed twice overnight. We make bonfires, we sing songs, we get to know each other. And on this last picture, you can see how we're ready to return home. And since that moment, since then, actually, I've been organizing such camps every year. My students, since then, recommend the same thing to each and every teacher. This is the best way to know each other when there is no school environment around. And this is the best thing for new people, for new groups. However, that was the time when, given my experiences, I was looking for the way to handle problems. I was missing one tool that was necessary to have to build relationships was already clear, but I didn't have a tool. Over 5 years ago, I discovered such tool. And the tool was Marshall Rosenberg's Nonviolent Communication. That was the time when I managed to break this invisible glass, when I managed to see the person in a student. This was by then the newly discovered language that I've been using ever since in the school. The structure of that language that I'd like to introduce to you here briefly, well, I've used this iceberg image here. What you can see on the surface are above the surface. You can see the facts. You can see the positions and maybe opinions as well. These are filtered by our emotion. The emotion that you can see in the middle. However, the most important part of this empathetic language are needs. The needs that you can see at the bottom of this iceberg. The needs of both teachers and students. The nonviolent communication is a very empathetic one because we manage to reach those needs at the very deep level. We acknowledge emotions as well. It differs from a non-empathetic language, which tends to aim at convincing others to our own position, which leads to misunderstandings. Marshall Rosenberg is, or was, unfortunately, the creator of this nonviolent communication method. He taught that language. He was a peacemaker, so he invented these two symbols that you saw at the beginning, and these live in my lab. And the giraffe symbolizes an empathetic communication, and this is due to the fact that this is the land animal that has the largest heart. So this gives us the image of how to address a question of communication from certain perspective. Jackal is the symbol of attacking, blaming the interlocutor. I'll try and use some examples so that you can understand it well. I can't really use this language that I mean. You could add the tone of voice here in your imagination. So the first phrase: how many times should I tell you that you should behave? Do you understand what I'm saying to you? The second phrase: you're always late. You're interfering in my class. I won't let you in for third time. Why aren't we using the Jackal's language in class? Why are we using, the Jackal's language in class? Well, we give orders. We demand submission. We make threats. We pose threats to our partners in communication. This stems from the fact that we've got it's difficult for us to understand our partner's perspective. submit ourselves to our emotions and not try and understand our partners. We're not aware of the needs, our needs and the partner's needs. We do not acknowledge the fact that somebody may not be okay with fulfilling our demands. The Jackal's language leads us to put etiquettes on our students as truants, as lazy ones, etc. In that way, we do not discover the reason behind these behaviors. We do not work on improving it, and we do not help the students to find their own way to understand the problems. Such way, we won't work out the solutions for bad grades or for bad behaviors. If we can't do that, if we do not create a situation where they would like to explain that on their own to ourselves, what consequence can it have? You'll see it on the TV probably. We all know the stories. The 4 steps rule allows for us to implement the nonviolent communication language, and allows us to lead to the building of relationship. First, we take a snapshot, we take a picture, we observe. If you can't understand something, you make a question. Then there are the emotions. The emotions that are awakened due to the situation that's produced. And then we move on to the needs that I've already mentioned, very deep down under the water of an iceberg. Then the needs, the basic needs of each and every person, such as physical needs and also closeness, tenderness, etc. And finally, demands, or actually requests to cooperate.
So the sentences that I read before could be translated into the language of nonviolent communication. This is just an example. I can see that it's difficult for you to hear what I have to tell you, and I'm sad because of that, because I would like you to hear me, or maybe you have something to tell me. I believe that yesterday you were 10 minutes late, today 12 minutes late, and I'm annoyed because being punctual is important for me. Why are you late? Can you tell me? This is your second D that you get in my class, and I'm concerned. Can you tell me what's the reason why you haven't had much success in learning maths? When you address a student, it's important not to belittle them, not to criticize them, not to stress them in presence of the others. So the best way is to address them just face to face. This language may seem artificial if we were always to follow 4 steps. But of course you can use let's say daily language to express the same idea. For example, I can see that you said, is there something you would like to tell me? I believe you are annoyed, you're nervous. Can you tell me about it? I believe that people should be sincere. Can you tell me what was the situation like from your point of view? And I'm really tired after coming back home. Can you help me with preparing the lunch? We, the teachers, have a lot to do. And although many of us do not want to introduce any changes to the way of working, I believe it is necessary, let alone because of all the changes taking part around us. And of course you can say, yeah, it's always been the way it was, and I kind of turned out to be a responsible human being. But the world is changing. The reality is changing. We need to take those changes into account. Research shows and I'm basing myself on the research of my ex-student, Kinga Woskowska. It turns out that the youth, when they need support, can't rely on their teachers, can't turn to their teachers. When there is some kind of misunderstanding, students react with lying, with fright, but also with aggression. 65% of activities after a conflict with a teacher, it leads to further escalation of such a conflict. 1 in 4 teachers, as a way of convincing, uses screaming at students. According to teachers, according to parents, the teachers cannot understand their children, the students in general, and they also point to the lack of capacity to understand the students and to create real relationships. On the other side, what happens is that teachers talk about problems of their students in public. What else? What they do? Teachers ask parents to come to school, and the teachers ask the parents to influence their children, to change their behavior. Why is it important to have a real relationship at school? I can understand the motivation of my students. I can understand their approach, what they do, and it gives me the opportunity to work effectively. And what are the benefits on the part of the student? They have good relationships with their family and their peers. They can feel well at school, and they can develop themselves in accordance to their needs and talents. If we teach students soft skills, such as empathy or cooperation, we make their lives easier, and we make them better adjusted to the needs of the labor market. For 5 years, I've been studying nonviolent communication. I've been teaching nonviolent communication to my students, to different groups. Last year, I was awarded a prize for teachers mediators, and one of my students came third in a nationwide competition, and her work was on the nonviolent communication. It was, just as I said, a nationwide competition for scientific works exploring. This year, Zuzia Droszcz is a finalist of a second edition, and her project is entitled "Do Not Take Your Heart to Heaven." This is a work on transplantations, and it was a kind of awareness-raising campaign. Kinga's project, the one that won a third place, led to an organization of international conference in Zduńska Wola on empathic communication, and was entitled Empathic Poland. There were over 200 participants. And what's interesting, we organized the conference on a day that was off for students, and a big number of our students participated as volunteers in in its organization. And something that I would never expect was what my student told me, that the best thing, the most important thing he learned at school was how to solve a conflict. Neurobiology, this branch of science, which is a great source of knowledge, and I believe we'll manage to organize a conference on neurobiology. I'm also realizing a project on reorganization of education, let's say rebirth of education, and also we carry out this project on transplantation awareness raising. And there is my slogan from my lab. So let us not be divided by what differentiates us. And what's my understanding of a role of a teacher today? I believe that this role should be redefined. A teacher is somebody who will help you develop yourself, who will help you achieve in the world where a human being cannot be replaced by anything else.